Hey, so I'm going to show you one of my favorite techniques. I love using penny black stamps with my Mini Misti to get this beautiful multi-layered stamp. And so this one here that I'm going to use for today is called the Penny Black Bell and Berries number 40-576. And it's a couple years old. It's an older one, but it's a classic and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to show you some fun thing that I like to do with it. Now I'm going to use my Mini Misti, and I've taken the foam pad out because the stamp that I'm going to use has the foam already attached to it. I like to place a couple pieces of cardstock on the bottom of my Mini Misti just to give it a little bit more depth and pressure when I do my stamping. So I'm going to put A2 card front, so that would be a 4-inch by 5¼ inch piece of cardstock. I'm going to take my bell stamp and I'm going to place it on the card exactly where I want it to go. I'm going to have it over to the right as much as possible, line that up, make sure that my bell is nice and straight, and then close the lid. Now when I do that, the lid picks up the stamp. And so now each time I stamp, I just have to make sure that the cardstock goes back into this corner, that I don't ever move the stamp, and it'll always realign so that I can do multi-layers of stamping. So I'm going to start out with the bell, and as you can see from my stamp, it has a little bit of ink that's left on it, that's stained it. I often do the bell in red, but I've decided this time to do it in blue. I'm using distress markers, and I know they're continuing a lot of these, but they're a water-based marker. And the reason that I like them is that they will actually hold off from drying too quickly, so that you can stamp them onto your, you can color them onto your image, onto your stamp, and then stamp it. Now, we can't use Copics because they are alcohol based and they are meant to dry really quickly so that you can do blending a different way. And so for these, I like the water-based because they don't dry too fast and I can do multi-layered stamping. Now mine are getting older. I don't feel like buying re-inkers for every single one of them. And so I'm just trying to hold out and get as much out of them as I can. So I've just colored that bell, and now I'm gonna pull it over here and stamp. Okay, so again, I'm gonna just make sure that my paper always goes back into this corner. Now, most of the time it stays because of the magnet. The magnet keeps it nice and tight, but I do want to make sure, and I just always follow up to make sure it's in that corner. Now I'm going to take some peacock feathers and I'm going to do a bit of shading, and I'm just following the stamp example. And the darker shading is over here on this side of the bell. And so I'm going to do that same side. So it was the left side on the front, but once I turn it over, it's the right side on this side. So now I'm just going to use my marker. This one's much fresher, has lots of ink in it still, and I'm going to color that on. So I like to use the brush kind of on its side. So I lay it down almost quite horizontal and then brush that on. I take my finger and I just dab it off on that edge just to soften that so that I don't get a pen mark, and kind of just soften that, okay? And then I'm gonna stamp, and I'm gonna just grab a baby wipe so that I can keep just wiping my finger off so I don't get that all over my image. Oh, you can see how that's highlighting that already. It's so pretty. Now I'm going to take, for my final color, some Mermaid Lagoon, and using the side again, just adding a little bit there to the edge. Now I've gone over onto the leaf, so I'm just going to wipe that off before I stamp it. Come down here a little And I'm just going to give that a little bit of an outline over there on that side as well. Okay, and then again, just going to dab that off with my finger a little bit so it's not too sharp. Wipe that on my baby wipe. And gorgeous. I love how it's outlined it, and I love the shadowing there that we've got. Beautiful highlight. I'm going to take the Hickory Smoke, which is a pretty gray color, and I'm going to do the bottom bell. Just keep making sure my paper is in the corner, and I'm going to just do a little bit of highlighting there. Sorry, shadowing. Highlight is on the top end, and that's where we make things lighter. Shadowing is on the bottom end where we make things darker. Now I'm going to do my leaves, and I'm going to start with a light color again. And this time I'm going to go with Mowed Lawn. Okay, so my mowed lawn is getting a little bit dried out. I have a second one here. Oh, it's getting a little dry too, but it is definitely in better shape than the first one. Okay, so now because my markers are getting a little dry, a little old and worn out, I'm not going to do all the leaves before I stamp because the ink will just dry out too quickly. And so I'm going to just do, I've got 4 there, I'm going to do, and I'm going to stamp it. So now you can see where it's lifted my paper. So I want to make sure to realign that really well. That is a key, because if it's not realigned, when I stamp, it's going to get blurry and it's going to be off. And basically my image is now ruined and I have to start over. And trust me, I have done that more than once or twice. So I've gotten quite good at just checking and rechecking to make sure I've got that paper in the corner so that I'm not getting a blurry image that I have to now throw away after all that work. Okay, so I'm going to just keep coloring these leaves. Now, as I color them, it is important just that I watch my brush strokes. I try to kind of follow whatever it is that I am coloring and just keep the brush strokes kind of in the same line, because sometimes those brush strokes do show up once I stamp it. All right, there it is. There's my leaves, my first layer of the leaves. And so I'm going to go a little darker with some peeled paint. And again, I'm keeping my light source up here, and my shadowing is going to be on the bottom kind of area. So I'm just adding a little bit to these leaves. Okay, I've got a few there. I'm going to stamp that off. Oh, card shifted. Okay, add some more shadow under here. Under here, kind of define this leaf and this one. I think I already did that guy, but sure, we'll do them some more. I like to arrange my paper, make sure my cardstock is in the right spot, and then I color and then I stamp. That way I can make sure that the ink stays nice and wet, and then I can stamp right away. Okay, so I'm going to add just a little bit of definition in here to some of these leaves. Okay, maybe just a little bit over here too. All right. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so just making sure it's in the corner still. And I'm going to now add just a little bit of the forest moss. Just a little bit to the bottom. Give a little shadow, a little bit more texture. This is the key to this technique, is to just do multi-layers. And this is how you get it to just look so real. So now I'm going to soften some of those out a little bit. They're looking a little crisp in their lines. And press that down. All right. Whew. Now I can also, at this point, I can add a little bit more, but I can also just take my marker while this is all very wet and just very lightly add a little bit of a vein mark in here, very, very lightly with my brush. I'm barely even touching the card, so it stays very faint. All right. Okay, it's looking lovely. Now I'm going to take some vintage photo and I'm going to do my branches. And so I can now take and kind of come over a little bit of the leaf if I want to, right? I could just kind of darken that up a little in a few spots. A little bit of a shadow in here, making sure I've got my little twigs, my little branch. Okay, I'm going to stamp. Just making sure to catch that while it's all nice and wet. That's looking really good. Come down here and do my little twigs down here. Aha, see how gorgeous that looks. All right, my last one to do is the berries. And so I often do the berries in red, and I decided I wanted to add a bit of pink to these ones. And so I'm gonna start out with picked raspberry and do my berries in that color first. Oh, see how gorgeous that looks? It's so crisp. Just such a pretty combination with the turquoise bell. I really like this. Ah, loving it. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit of the fired brick and add my shadowing on the bottom of these berries. Define these up a little bit. Now my fired brick marker is pretty dry, so I'm not going to get too far before I got to stamp. Wow, hey, this guy down here, I'm going to add just a little bit more shadowing. Okay, isn't that lovely? Ooh, I'm loving that. Okay, so there it is. It's beautiful. I'm loving it the way that it looks right now. So now I'm going to take that wet wipe, that baby wipe, and I'm going to very softly wipe away the excess ink on this stamp. Now I want to go soft because I don't want to shift and move the stamp at all. This is the key to this technique, is that we need to be able to seal it with Versamark and clear powder so that we can then do the background. So we keep it in its exact position and let it dry a little bit. And then we're going to use clear ink, Versamark ink, and we're going to use clear powder and heat set that. So I'm gonna just make sure that's good and dry. Okay, load that up with my Versamark. When you're inking, you don't want to tap too hard You want to keep it soft. Make sure my paper is in the right position. Okay, so now I'm going to take it out of the MISTI, and I'm going to put on my clear embossing powder, and I like to keep it in this little container so that it keeps it contained. Okay, and I'm going to heat set that. Okay, so now that I know I've got my image, it's looking great, and I can now take the stamp, and I will clean the Versamark off of it, but I can take it off of there. I'm going to take my cardstock, put it back into the corner, hold that down, and I'm now going to take my sentiment, which is from the Penny Black set called Believe. Oh, whoops, and I do this every time. First, because I'm using a thin stamp now, I need to put that black pad back in the corner, in the Mini MISTI. Put my magnets back in, and now place that on top. All right. The other great thing about the MISTI, if you've never used one, is that it has these grid lines on the lid, and so you can, sorry, you probably could see my head, my hair there, but you can actually see the lines to make sure that it's lined up with the grid to make sure it's straight. So now I'm going to take black Onyx VersaFine ink and load up my stamp. Remembering, you don't have to press hard, you just have to tap your ink pad and stamp that on. Okay, gorgeous. I will set that aside and heat emboss my words so that it will seal them as well, so that I can do my background. Okay, looking so gorgeous, hey? Loving it. All right, so now for the background, what I've done is I took a bit of Uncharted Mariner Distress Oxide, one of my favorite colors, and I just flipped it over and smushed a little bit into a piece of craft paper, okay? Then I take some water, and with a nice round brush, this is a size 10 brush, I'm gonna activate that ink because it's dried and really water out that ink. I'm gonna just place it on top of a piece of paper towel, and I'm now gonna just add some water, some inked water up here. And because we have the image sealed because of the Versamark, none of this image will bleed. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a little, I call this the chicken dance. This is kind of a little splat splat, little chicken dance around the card. And there we go. Just a little bit. Okay, so now I could also take just a little bit of that ink, activate that up there, and I could do just a little bit of splatter. Sometimes I like to do that as well. Now, when I do the splatter, while the background is still wet, the splatter is not going to be sharp and crisp. It's going to kind of bleed out because I've already got water on the card. But it still gives it a soft, kind of pretty look to it. So there it is, this gorgeous card using the Belle and Berries. And here it is once again, finished up. I matted it onto a green matting. I like doing white cards because it's easy to write in them come Christmas time. And then I added a little bit of baker's twine to the top. So I hope you enjoyed that video and you're inspired to create.